Right, thank you everybody. The focus of this session is on service workshops, and we're going to start with our panel discussion, or panel presentation I guess, with Ashton and Loyiso from Saide, providing some background on the service workshops, which are the workshops offered by the 7 Siyaphumelela partner institutions, in which they get to share their good practice around student support and student success with the whole network. And after looking a little bit at the background, the origin, the evolution, and the current status and future plans of the service workshops, Gugu from University of the Free State will showcase the work that they are doing around academic advising. And as you have seen from Francois' slides, it's been very impactful at U of S, and I'm sure equally impactful at other institutions. And then finally, the session will end with Liesl from Nelson Mandela University sharing with us their initiative around supplemental instruction and the supervisor training course that they offer the Siyaphumelela network. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon everybody. And I'm very pleased to be standing in front of you to actually show that I'm a human, Ashton Maherry. I'm not a chatbot who's been spamming you with emails. So today we'll be talking about the Siyaphumelela services. You've already heard about the coaches earlier, you've heard about our regional networks, and we'll be talking today about the last part, which is around our work streams and our workshops. So when we look at the work streams, this was presented on Wednesday, and we've got quite a few work streams. So these are the discussion forums that explore issues related to student success, and they can be developed into something further, such as projects, workshops, webinars, conference presentations. And you can see we've had the academic advising, the National Student Data Warehouse, the first year experience, the mental health. The mental health is doing a workshop later today. Open education, this was actually missing from our slide on Wednesday. We also have an open education work stream, and then the student tracking work stream. So what is actually developed from these work streams? From the academic advising, you've heard Francois speak about this already, and will be spoken later in today's panel discussion as well. The National Student Data Warehouse has turned into the DHED National Student Data Warehouse project. The first year experience, which I was very fortunate to be involved in the early stages, they're doing an annual webinar series every October annually. There's conference presentations at SANREC, at Siyaphumelela, workshops, presentations. We also did podcasts for the first time. We had to pivot due to COVID, so we all got to do podcasts with the first year experience work stream, and they also do service workshops. In terms of the mental health, there's a workshop that will be taking place at this Siyaphumelela conference, and they're developing a data-driven strategy for co-creating a national mental health framework for higher education. So that's just a tidbit in terms of you if you want to actually attend their workshop later today. When it comes to the open education work stream, we've had service workshops. You would have also noticed that in your 2023 addenda to the MOAs, there's a clause there that all of the conference presentations and workshop materials gets released under a Creative Commons license. And of course, we also have a lot of OER workshops that have been presented and will still be presented later this year. When it comes to the student tracking, this one we're hoping will accelerate with pace. We'll be doing something around the Data and Analytics Summit later this year, and we're also engaging with IDSC around standardizing some student success dashboards through Power Header. And I've added that over there because the gender gap work group has been discussed a couple of times with our partners, but it seems like we need to really do something about it in terms of establishing a work group or a work stream. So that's the work streams, and I'm now going to speak a little bit about the service workshops. So previously, in some of the questions that was asked was around what are we doing to share the best practices that has been happening in some of our partner institutions, and that's really what the service workshops are all about. They were originally planned to be face-to-face, but then COVID happened and we had to pivot, and we moved them onto the online environment. And I think that was actually a blessing because we saw that the number of workshops that were able to be delivered increased dramatically, as well as the attendance. People were just able to join into the Zoom sessions. There was no longer having to fly up, organize venues, pay for accommodation, pay for food, pay for catering. Instead, we had it all online, and we were able to do so much more with less money. So how do we come about structuring these service workshops? And I wanted to present this to you from Siyaphumelela 1, the theory of change. And it's around the outcomes in terms of knowing, doing, and being. And this has kind of developed into the theory of change that we're using for our service workshops. A change in what we know, a change in what we do, and a change in who we are, a change and transforming our institutions. So this is the theory of change that we've been using for our service workshops. We then try to structure it. So really a change in knowing, a change in doing, and a change in being results in student success. Very simplistic. But how do we actually go about it? Where do we focus our areas? So we landed up looking at all of the service workshops that had been presented by the institutions. And we started to figure out how we can group these. We pulled on a whole lot of different resources. We looked at ICAT, we looked at what Achieving the Dream does, and we eventually clustered it into these three areas of supporting students, the use of data for student success, and transforming our institutions. And you would see in the conference program as well that we've actually used these learning pathways to structure the presentations for the conference. And lastly, to add to it, so we've got our knowing, doing, transforming, we've got our learning pathways, and then we had a look at the levels that these workshops were offered at. Was it at the foundational phase, the basic phase? Was it at the intermediate phase, or was it at the advanced stage? So that generated a whole lot of information, and don't pay attention to this in too much detail because I'll take you through it individually. But it's quite interesting to see that at the top we've got our supporting students, and those are the workshops that were offered in 2021 and 2022. We've got a whole lot of workshops around the use of data for supporting students, and then we've got a few workshops around transforming institutions. And it's interesting to see how this is translated to the conference, where we've got 3 parallel sessions on supporting students, 1 on the use of data to support students, and 4 presentations on transforming institutions. So if we're looking at gaps and things where we can improve in the future, for me it's definitely around the transforming institutions, the workshops that get offered over there. And then all of the workshops that we're doing around the use of data needs to be needs to be applied. And we need to be seeing those presentations and the best practices coming through from the institutions. So if we have a look at it in a bit more detail, the supporting students, there's a lot of work that was done around the holistic student support, the supplemental instruction comes in over there, your open textbooks, and that's the change in what we know. And then it's to the change in what we do. And lastly, the transforming, you can see not much over there. So again, an opportunity is around focusing some of our future workshops around a change in what we do. I think we know, most of us are doing, but are we really transforming? When it comes to the use of data, again, lots around what we know, lots around what we do, not so much around how we actually transform in our institutions. And when it comes to the transforming institutions, there you can see it's all around what we know, very little around what we do, and nothing in terms of the transforming. So that's just something to think about in terms of, for the partners, when it comes to offering the service workshops in the future. And in the next phase, where should we be focusing some of the service workshops? Here are some of the evaluation comments around it. It was quite interesting in yesterday's session around data. Somebody was asking, how do we get students to actually complete their survey forms? I would like to ask you the same thing. How do we get you to complete your evaluations of the workshops? You'll also be having the evaluation of the conference. Please complete it. One of the things we said is if students see that their data is being used and we're closing the feedback loop, they'll see the importance of it. Please see the importance of your data, your evaluation. We are trying to close the feedback loop. Our response rates here are very, very low all around, but the data is really useful, really insightful. It goes back to the partners, the people who host the service workshops, so that they can improve it moving forward. Okay, so please complete your evaluation forms. Since I've got the pulpit, I'm going to preach for a little bit. Complete the evaluation forms for the service workshops, complete the evaluation forms for the conference. That will be sent out later today or tomorrow, and we will use that evidence to show how we're going to improve our conferences and our workshops moving forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Let me repeat that a bit. Good afternoon. That sounds better and very heartwarming. Thank you. So I am Loyiso, Maciko, and one of the roles that I play within Saide is to coordinate the national service workshops across all the institutions that are offering them. And one of the in fact, to ensure that these service workshops are effectively and efficiently implemented, we have adopted a four-stage approach between Saide staff and the institutions that are offering the Siyaphumelela national service workshops. That consists of the planning, i.e., making sure that the services that are being offered are aligned with the Siyaphumelela goals. Secondly, is the logistic coordination, which also comes from the MOA that the partner institutions will be very familiar with. And coming to the slide that you're looking at currently is the convening of the actual national service workshop. And there's actually a lot of work that takes place before those service workshops that you see. One of that is the interaction between Saide staff and the facilitators, the institutional leads, so that we give clarity in terms of expectations. We also assess the readiness of the institution that will be offering the workshop. Last one, the confirmation of the resource requirements. Now, last year we had about 11, in fact 13 service workshops that were offered. Out of that 13, 11 were online and 2 were in person, face-to-face. About 18 institutions attended those workshops. Out of that, we have counted about 307 people that attended. On average, you are looking at about 26 people per workshop. If you want to zoom into the institutions that were part in terms of the partner institutions, the participants and associate institutions, you'll note that about 8 out of that 13 were partner institutions, that 8 workshops were attended by the partner institutions, and 5 were attended by the participants and associates. We thought that we have done pretty well for 2022. Little did we know what was coming for 2023. Brace yourselves. Up to date from January up until now, that is June, we have about 8 workshops that have been offered by the institution. So you can count the difference considering that we are mid-year currently. And I'd like to submit to you that as from July up until end of November, we are expecting 11 national service workshops that will be offered. You will see those in my next slide. That speaks volumes about the value of the service workshops that are being offered, and hence on this slide you are seeing that there's been an increase in terms of the number of people who are attending. Up to date, 251 people have attended. On average, you can pick up from the previous slide that the average attendance has increased from 26 to about 31 people per workshop. And even if you look at who is coming for the service workshops, I mean, it's even a balance between the partner institutions and the participants and associates, i.e., all these universities are seeing the value in terms of attending those national service workshops. As I said, that you should fasten your seatbelts. You will note on this slide that I'm not going to go into detail in terms of each and every workshop, but as early as the 26th of July, we have a service workshop on the gateway to success. I'm mentioning this because Kathleen Thomas, the student from West University, on her presentation, she mentioned this as one of the activities that she was part of that contributed to her success. So it will be interesting to see what that consists of from West University when they present it. And I'm just going to touch one more on that. There's also the mental health work stream, which will be providing a service workshop. You will have picked up from Ashton's presentation that mental health was among the work streams. Now, after they've had quite a number of discussions, engagement around the issues of mental health across institutions in South Africa, they have been able to reach a stage to say, we are now ready to offer a national service workshops to all institutions. I think that does deserve a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. It's those national service workshops, about 11 of them, and 2 of those will be face-to-face. On the 1st of September, there's one that will be in UCT, and another one will be at UFs. I think it's about 3 days, if I'm not mistaken. But we will be communicating with the institutional leads. I've started that already during the course of the week. For those that we woke up with emails, you might have picked that up. So we are looking forward to the rest of the service workshops that will be offered. This is not the complete list because there are those who said, Loyiso, wait a bit. We do want to offer a service workshop, but the date will follow on later on. Lastly, it's very important to pick up from this slide that in terms of the learning pathways that Ashton was speaking on, you are having about 5 national service workshops that will be offered that are all about supporting students. That speaks volumes about the importance of giving support in institutions. Secondly, you pick up on transforming institutions. You've got about 4 service workshops that will be covering the learning pathway on transforming institutions. And you have about 2 that are looking at use of data for student success. And I'd like to submit to you that it's not an indicator of the lack of importance of using data. But you might have picked up in the number of conversations that we have across institutions that institutions do want to use data to inform their decision making. However, there is limited capacity across institutions. If you zoom in and see who is offering those service workshops, you will realize that we do have a challenge in terms of capacity when it comes to who is well trained, who is more familiar with use of data, and who's willing also to offer that in our national service workshops. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I would firstly want to take this opportunity to really acknowledge the presence of the Crescent Foundation, Saide colleagues, the Department of Higher Education and Training, Siyaphumelela partners, participants, associates, colleagues that I call the change makers in the system with me. Allow me this afternoon to take a detour and retrace with me the steps of where advising has stemmed from in South Africa. Whether you call it academic advising, student coaching, the essence is advising, and the essence is student support and success. We've all heard one or two quotes about working together, student success. Caitlin shared some quotes. Professor Stradom shared a few quotes. I think through my time having been part of the Siyaphumelela community, I've heard numerous times a few quotes, and the first one that jumps to mind is the African proverb that if you want to go fast, if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. And the New Zealanders, when I think about the rugby space, you would recall that in the recent Rugby World Cup, when South Africa won, we spoke about stronger together. And for me, that encapsulates the essence of where South Africa is when it comes to working together to ensure and enable student success for our students. For me, I really think of this practice as academic advising. And just to explain to you why academic advising, it's really informed from a scholarly lens, from literature, best practice that has been in existence over 5 decades in the United States of America. But I, with due respect every institution that has adopted and adapted this concept of academic advising for their unique context in the South African space, to whether it is student advising, student coaching, we're all doing something to touch the student. 2016 was really when our conversations were starting to pick up momentum in the sector. Many would recall the student engagement work as early as 2006, but I want to jump 10 years ahead and talk about 2016, when the sector started talking about really what is the student success? How do we solve this conundrum of resolving and supporting student success optimally? And what jumps to mind again is a study that was conducted by the DHET, and you see the statistics on the graph there, that about almost 20% of students entering the system, this was a cohort study, that entered in 2005 in contact mode, graduated in 3 years, and 57.1 after 6 years. And you can see that time to graduation was really the biggest thing we were trying to understand. And I think Professor Stradom set it out very nicely in his presentation just now, saying when they met at the Fire and Ice, they were really trying to figure out what is the student success? How do we speak to each other? There's all of this that exists in the system, but what are we going to do? How are we going to be the change makers? How are we going to enable student success? Fast forwarding to 2017, a study conducted by the University of the Free State in a research report that was also presented at the Siyaphumelela conference, a report titled Creating Pathways, Academic Advising and Student Engagement. We looked at those students that really came for advising appointments, that had at least one encounter, because George Koo in his student engagement work found that students just need to have one encounter with an advisor to have that sense of belonging or to increase their chances of success. And we wanted to really look at what did it mean in our context. 2017, the report showed us that of the 1,456 students that came for an individual advising appointment, had a higher probability of passing more than 70% of their modules. Now this was starting to look promising for us. We looked at this, and this was irrelevant of APS score, really looking at if someone came and sit with someone to talk about whether psychosocial, being referred to a support service, they were in front of an academic advisor, what did that moment or that meeting mean to them? This was the evidence in 2017. What we did now is we dug into the student engagement indicators, and we really wanted to understand, looking at advising and the student engagement indicators and the students that participated in the space, what did this mean? The data continued to confirm what the Creating Pathways report revealed. You can see on the screen here, in blue, the students that did not participate in advising, and in red, the students that participated in advising. And this is comparatively looking at the national cohort, and this is where you see that the students, for instance, with indicators like collaborative learning, students that participated in advising had about a 40 mean score average in terms as compared to 36 for those that did not participate in advising. So some could say maybe they were prompted by their advisor to really participate in some of these student engagement opportunities created in the system. So what we were seeing is advising was starting to touch base with the relevant activities that meant the most for students when it comes to student success. 2018, this image looks very familiar for many of us. The ministerial statement is released. We received the ministerial statement, and what do we see on the screen? Student advising. For the first time in the higher education sector, student advising is pronounced as an intentional pillar or lever that enables student success. What does this mean for us as practitioners, scholars? There was a future for advising. Parallel to this ministerial statement was a call to action. We were called to settle the philosophical debate. We were called to accept responsibility for what we as universities can do, what we can do to be student ready. There was focus, we were called to action to focus more on what we can control, and that meant we needed to look more into our data and our support interventions that we were rendering. We were called to maximize the use of existing resources. I need not say, we've heard from all the presentations, the call to integration, the call to collaboration, and not competition. We were also called to use data to develop strategy, and we were also called to change to support student success, and this is the very community that started that for us. Between 2007 and 2008, the Siyaphumelela academic advising workstream started developing. We were a very small community, and I remember us gathered to discuss what does advising mean for you in your context. And these are the institutions and the key founders in advising at the time that participated in this. We really looked at where does advising exist in your institution? Does it exist in the student orientation program? Does it exist in your first year experience program? Does it exist in your first year seminar program, or even in your mentorship and tutorial programs? Well, needless to say, we all came up to a consensus that there was a form of advising taking place in all our different institutions, in different forms, but we came to a consensus that advising is an intentional and ongoing teaching and learning practice. And I think this meant a lot for us as a sector, as a community, because we started unpacking and understanding advising for the South African context. We all came to a conclusion that the purpose of advising is really to empower students, to help them align not just their academic aspirations, but to look at their personal, their academic and their career goals, and bringing that into one conversation that can, in essence, channel them through to being employable graduates. We looked at facilitating a conceptual understanding, sharing of relevant information, and building a relationship, but most importantly, having a meaningful academic experience and having that sense of belonging. In 2008, we submitted then, or we were awarded the collaborative grant via the Department of Higher Education and Training to really start looking at the work of advising. 7 institutions formed part of this collaborative grant, and we were committed to really realizing the deliverables you see on the screen, really expanding the dedicated advising capacity, having baseline investigations at our various institutions, enabling collaboration, having national sharing, and establishing communities of practice in our space. We concluded this grant in 2021, and we then got awarded a second round of the DHEAD grant, and in this instance there were 14 institutions as opposed to the original 7. Again, we re-looked at the deliverables and continued to work on improving the deliverables we were committed to in the first DHEAD grant. Again, we were looking at the appointment of an expansion of dedicated advising capacity, training and development, enhanced data-driven practice, pilot and share advising practices, national and international sharing, and then the establishment of an advising community to enable success. To show where we are, we've since become allied members of the National Academic Advising Association, which is the global community for academic advising, known as NACADA, and we have adapted and adopted their framework that talks to advisor competencies. And in the circle there, you see the 5 units or components that make up the short learning program that has been developed in collaboration with Georgia State University to advance the professionalization of academic advisors in the South African higher education sector. This data you saw just now on Prostradum's presentation, but I wanted to focus on the 2 lines. You would notice that we had the program start in 2018, and to date we have had those number of participants. But what's interesting is participants versus certified advisors is sitting at 83%. So 83% of the participants that have come to our advising short learning program have been certified, and I'm glad to see many of them sitting in this room this afternoon with us. In terms of the reflections of the participants in the short learning program, I've just taken 5 of the quotes. And you can see here that the advisors or the professionals that have participated in this short learning program have really encountered this as a meaningful experience that has enabled them or even professionalized or enhanced their practices at their various institutions. The third one says, I realized how important my role is in a student's lives. And I think that meaning-making process for you as a professional translates into how you then render your service to students. This is our community in 2023. You can see we are now covering 18 of the 26 universities, where we started with only 6. And this is really looking promising in the landscape of the higher education, scholarly practice, but also community of practice. And I really want to implore that if your institution is not part of this community, come on board. This is the best community to exist in. You've heard the conversations, and you should be part of the conversations and continue forming part of that. Looking beyond 2023, we are looking at building onto the short learning program and developing pathways. And what the pathways will then enable professionals to specialize their advising practices. So no longer just the generic advisor, now you're becoming an advisor with specialized components, looking at data analytics, looking at leadership and management, looking at assessment of advising, looking at ethical standards, looking at career and career development and curriculum advising practices. And this will continue the collaborations between different institutions, because many of the institutions have started tapping into various components indicated on these pathways. So I look forward to those that have not participated in the short learning program to seeing you between the 9th and the 12th of October in Johannesburg when we present the short learning program. And for those that have already participated in the short learning program, you can look forward to being part of these pathways as co-contributors but also participants. And again, I just want to thank you for being part of this community. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I am here to tell you about supplemental instruction, and the take for supplemental instruction is different than it is for academic advising, in the sense that academic advising is something that grew from Siyaphumelela, where SI is something that we brought into Siyaphumelela, and to utilize the Siyaphumelela network and to try and bring different national streams together. So I'm going to start by sharing with you just the international definition of supplemental instruction for those of you who may not have heard about supplemental instruction before. Supplemental instruction is a non-remedial approach, an approach to learning that supports students towards academic success by integrating what to learn with how to learn. So it's not just about the course content, but how do you tackle that course content? Often if you ask a student, what is it that you're struggling with in this particular course, you'd be surprised how seldom they're going to focus on a specific content issue, as sometimes it's about, I don't know how to study for the course, or I don't know how to do the practicals for the course. And so it integrates the two. It consists of regularly scheduled, voluntary, out-of-class study sessions driven by student needs. I often get asked the question, how does SI differ to tutorials? Nobody sets a tutorial assignment or a small work assignment for SI that students have to complete in the session. The entire agenda of what happens in the SI session is compiled by the students. What would you like to do today? What would you like to spend time on? This is a space where the student voice can be heard, where the students can say, this is what I'm struggling with. And if what they are struggling with is academic content, then that is what will be covered in the session. If what they are struggling with is keeping up with their note-taking during class, then that is what will be discussed in the session. It is entirely based on their needs. It's one of the few spaces we have where the student has full control of what's happening in that learning space. The sessions are facilitated by trained peer leaders who utilize collaborative activities to ensure peer-to-peer interaction in small groups. And it's implemented in high-risk courses in consultation with the academic staff, and it is supported and evaluated by a trained SI coordinator. I am briefly just going to put it in context for you so that you can understand. So why are we talking about an SI national office, and how does that work? So in the early 1960s in America, there was a small private institution that was told that they need to become part of the public University of Missouri system. So they went from a private institution to part of a public institution. They were told to reach out to the urban centers, and with that came changes. And those changes were that they no longer drew the top 20% of high school graduates. That was no longer who they were allowed to target for their student body. They became culturally and academically diverse. The attrition rate rose from 20% to 45%, only getting about 55% of their students through the system. Now, if you look at those challenges that they were facing, you will start seeing some similar patterns to what we've experienced in South Africa in the early 1990s, similar changes. And that is how they then went about it. So about 10 years later, in 1972, if we think things move slowly here, it sometimes moves slowly in other places as well. So in 1972, 10 years later, they were still experiencing the same challenges. And then Dr. Deanna Martin did a survey at the institution to find out what the perceptions were of academic support. She did a lot of research into, amongst others, behavioral learning theory, cognitive development theory, cooperative learning. And out of that was formed a supplemental instruction program that was implemented in 1973. It is 50 years old this year internationally. And it, from 1993 onwards, it started expanding internationally, and thereby they became the SI International Center. There are 4 national centers around the world. You can see them here on the screen. And how did it then come to us in South Africa? I'm doing what Charles did. I'm paging here instead of the screen. I apologize. So how did it come to us us in South Africa. In 1993, when our university was busy with its transformation planning, we realized that we have a problem. Our academic development programs that we had in place were not geared towards the diversity of students that we were going to get into our institutions. And that is when we heard about the supplementary instruction program. And if you recall the challenges that they were facing internationally, you will see that there were similar challenges that we were facing. What really appealed to us about the SI program is that it labels courses, not students. We didn't want an academic support program in a transformation space that would just keep labeling people. It's one of the biggest mistakes we made in our country up until that point, and we didn't want to perpetuate the problem. And that is something that really appealed to us about SI, that it could be a vehicle for transformation and catalyst for change in the student support space. This year is celebrating 30 years of SI in South Africa. So what are our duties as the SI National Office? Who are we and why are we in this space? We offer SI Supervisor Training and SI Advanced Supervisor Training that comes with an internationally recognized certificate. So anywhere in the world you go, if you have a certificate from our national centre, it will be recognized and it will be accepted. But we also offer audits, reviews, presentations, workshops. We offer a biannual SI National Conference. We assist institutions with troubleshooting and networking. Many of the institutions in this space will know that we often would say to people, you need to talk to so-and-so. I just did it this morning for Danae, that's why she's smiling at me. And from about 2018 onwards, we've become a little bit more deliberate about trying to connect SI to existing networks and existing spaces. And that comes from Siyaphumelela, where Siyaphumelela has been saying we need to start breaking down the silos, we need to start collaborating more. And it made sense for us, therefore, if we already have a national network of people who've been through SI training, is either offering SI or adapted forms of SI in their institutions, many of them sitting in this room here that have SI programs or adapted SI programs. It makes sense for us to start bringing that into the space. And also as a way of paying it forward and to say thank you for the space that Siyaphumelela has created for us and for the things that Siyaphumelela has done for our institution. And so we offer on average 2 offerings a year to this space. I'm going to get quite blunt in some of this, if you will forgive me, but it's a way to understand. For us, the rationale was that a lot of institutions have professional development budget constraints. If you think of how many staff members you have and how many of them you can afford to send to training workshops and conferences and the budgets that go with that, there's always somebody in a queue somewhere that has to wait their turn. And this just seemed like a space where we can maybe create more opportunities and where we can open access a bit more for people to attend. It is a nice way for those of us who work in peer learning circles to use these training opportunities and discussion opportunities as a benchmarking exercise. Sometimes people come to SI training only to walk away feeling we're not doing badly, we're actually doing a great job at our institution already in what we're doing. And if you look at the delegate profile, that is what I have been enjoying most. The people in the Siyaphumelela space are so passionate about what they do, and that translates into the service workshops. You literally have people passionate about peer learning, spending some time together in the workshop, throwing around ideas and sharing, and that is an incredibly powerful space to be in. And then for those people who think we're only connected to the network to try and get money out of it, I thought I'll just not just demystifying SI, but also demystifying the finances. I thought I'll put it in budget for you. SI Supervisor Training registration fee for an individual is 3,500 rands, which is a quarter of what you pay internationally. They charge now up to $425 internationally for the same training. We can't do that in South Africa. It's just not realistic. So we've tried to keep it affordable, but it's still a substantial amount of money. So if each of the 17 universities part of Siyaphumelela, sends one delegate at 3,500 rands, that would have been 59,500. Now it just costs the Siyaphumelela network 15,000 rands, and we can get a delegate from each institution into our training. So it's an affordable way to send, because for institutions it's free. That 15,000 comes out of our workshop budget for our Siyaphumelela grant, and therefore we're sort of absorbing the cost, and we're creating 17 spaces for people for free, for those people who are maybe in the queue, haven't had an opportunity. And it helps us as well to get more institutions involved in discussing SI. And then our university has gained so much from Siyaphumelela. Things that, like the academic advising, our student success coaching comes from the academic advising that happens in Siyaphumelela. I've been watching Hlumelo, our student coordinator of the Quintile 1 to 3 mentoring program. He's been nodding his head off during most of the presentations today. And one of the things that came from our Siyaphumelela is our Quintile 1 to 3 mentoring program and the feedback we've received. If it wasn't for Siyaphumelela, we wouldn't have had that program. We wouldn't have known about the language challenges that those students really face. We think we have all the support in place, but then the students say, but we didn't even know what you were doing. We couldn't understand. I believe Hlumelo said to us in his first involvement program, you had all the support, but I couldn't understand. My English wasn't good enough to understand what it is that you offer. And so what we've done from his feedback, that is a direct benefit for us from the Siyaphumelela program that sponsored that, from Siyaphumelela that sponsored that program, is we now have translations of our SI marketing document in all 11 South African languages. It was a student project, a voluntary student project. It's available on our SI website. Anyone can go and download it. And furthermore, in our institution is a direct feedback of something that Siyaphumelela gave us. We now also have translations of our learning development services posters in all 11 South African languages available for download on our website. And these are just some of, I can go on and on about the gains that our institution have gained from being part of this very supportive network and from the funding that we receive so graciously from Kresge. And so if that means that we offer 1, maybe 2 workshops a year to this network at a much more affordable rate, some free spaces for people, it's a very small way of saying thank you for what this network has given to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our speakers, particularly to Gugu and Liesl, and of course to my colleagues from Saide as well. We won't take questions now because we have been running a little bit late and it's lunchtime. I'm sure everybody's wanting to stretch and get into the fresh air and eat something. But I'd just like to end by thanking all the partner institutions and associate institutions for the service workshops that they offer and for the sharing of good practice and successful interventions and opening up discussion around all these areas as part of their contribution to the Siyaphumelela network. Thank you very much and enjoy your lunch.